Hi, so this is my final reflection project for FYS about discrimination and how it relates to COVID-19. So to start off, I'll start with an experience I've had with discrimination. And it was very hard for me to come up with something, which I feel very grateful for. But the best example in my life is my experience with women's basketball. So oftentimes with women's basketball, it feels almost as if you're in the shadow of the men's basketball player, or it's very common for people to not think it's as fun to watch your games, or to think your games aren't as physical, or there's not as much skill. Um, and I saw this in little things, just little things like you would have to pay to get into the boys' game and not ours. Or we would have a back-to-back game with the boys and we would go first and they would go second, almost as if we were like the starting show and they were like the big finale. But what bothered me the most was our logos that we had. So I have examples. So this was our junior year warm-up jersey. As you can see, it says Toga Girls Basketball, whereas the boys logo looks like this. So it's just Saratoga Basketball, which bothered me because I didn't understand why we had to get labeled and the boys didn't. Like, why do we have to be distinguished and they don't? Almost like they're the basis. So I did take it upon myself senior year as a captain, when I was allowed to choose the apparel, to change our logo, just so that the younger girls can see that, we matter as much and our skill set is just as much as theirs is, and that our game is just as important. So, just an intro to the COVID-19 situation that we're in right now. So COVID-19 obviously has had an impact on a global scale. They say it originated in China, and now I'm in New York and it's impacting me. So I think the biggest thing that's going to come from this is the economies that are changing globally. How I think many countries are going to go into a depression. I know that the United States most likely will, because the GDP is so low, so many people are losing their jobs, people aren't spending as much, which will impact our lives for years to come. There's also a lot of social shifts that have occurred because of this virus. I think most people can see this in their everyday lives. I know for me, my 24-year-old sister is home from New York City, and we never thought we would live together for this long again. Both my parents have cut down their hours, and they've both had to fire people. And I myself am home from school. I can't see my friends even though I am home, and so that's a huge shift for everybody. Also, it's hard to get through this because we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I think it's important to realize how strong society has been, with each other, just protecting the vulnerable in this situation. So to tie my experience with discrimination into COVID-19, I chose women in general because obviously women's basketball isn't very applicable here. But I found a very good article published through the UN, saying that women's economic lives will be impacted disproportionately to men's, globally. So women's will be impacted much more. And I think this has a lot to do with the jobs that women hold globally, and how women's jobs globally aren't as steady as men's, or don't pay as much. So here's a few examples that the article gave. There's more in the article, but these were the ones that really stood out to me. So through this whole pandemic, one thing that's impacting women is that reproductive health services aren't as available to many women. That has to do a lot with losing their jobs, losing health care, not being able to afford contraceptives or feminine products, which can be unsanitary and unhealthy in many situations. Also, demand for unpaid childcare has increased a lot since all of the closing of the schools. which I know for myself, I'm home. Everybody I know that goes to school is home. It's easy to see how many people are living with their parents now. And this calls on women often to be the caretakers in the household, do often chores, cook, and if there are people who are still working or even who can't afford, to have their kids home all the time because they rely on school lunches, that can have a very impact on the financial stability of a family. Also, gender-based violence has increased a lot due to the stay-at-home orders. A lot of women are trapped with abusive partners and they can't get out of the situation, whether it be because finances or they have nowhere else to go. But there are some positives to look at for women in this situation. Women have had a huge impact on reducing the outbreak and helping those who are already infected. Some statistics that I found were that globally women are 70% of healthcare workers. So that's a lot of essential workers are women who are still going to work and helping people and saving lives. Also, 90% of the nurses in the United States are women, which I think is a huge number, and I think that really shows us how strong women can be in situations like this and how much they care to take care of the people around them. So here's some figures that I found in that UN article. The one to the left shows reports of the domestic violence I was talking about in the previous slide. So, for example, one of the figures says that in France, domestic violence has gone up by 30% just in reported cases. And another one says in Argentina, emergency calls for domestic violence rates has gone up 25% since the lockdown started, which are huge numbers, and it's sad to think about, but that's just the reality of it. The figure to the right also shows how much women are working from home and how important it is that women keep their pay just so that they can be able to help their families and be the healthcare workers that they are, or just be good mothers, sisters, daughters, whatever they need to be. So a historical context for this. The only other thing in history that I could think about that I have personally experienced the impact of is 9/11. I was 9 months old when 9/11 happened, so I don't remember it, but I do remember the aftermath. The aftermath has been my whole life. So I know that groups have been discriminated against due to 9/11. People from the Middle East, people are scared, maybe when they enter a room or when they approach them. And I think that's very similar to Asian people living in the United States nowadays. People are possibly scared that they have the virus or that they could be carrying it. And I think that's unjustified because you don't know people's life. You don't know where they've been. The likelihood that they have it is very low. The likelihood that they say brought it over is very, very low. And I think it's just unfair prejudices that we hold against people in both situations. So the implications of this pandemic, I think there's a lot to take away to improve society in the future. We talked in class about how systemic racism can have a huge impact on who is being affected and how right now the Black community is being impacted disproportionately to other races. I think this shows that we need to change something about how the system is run because we need to get people out of their impoverished situations. And a lot of them are of the same race, or minorities are often the people who live in these impoverished situations that are being hit hardest with the virus. So I think in the future we do need to improve their living situations. Also, unequal pay for women globally has resulted to a lot of women not being able to save enough to have savings for a situation like this, who are now maybe fired from their jobs, can't get work because of how bad the economy is right now. So I think we need to think toward the future. How can we improve women's pay? How can we improve their livelihood? And that will truly impact how we can deal with a situation like this in the future. So here are my references, and thank you.